a little bit, and I hope everybody here is doing very well. We have a lot to cover tonight. I think this is going to be a long show, and I know that some people in the past have had some issues with volume and everything. Well, you're just going to have to turn it up. That's all I can tell you. What's going on a little bit in Carrie and Susan and Concha. Um, and it seems now that they have some closed captioning going on there. How cool is that? Well, that's new. That is, how about that? How about that closed captioning? I'm going to even write that. Okay. Okay. So, what's going on, Tara? I see you, Tara. Miranda, and like I said, the closed captioning, which is completely new. Yeah, I went to Canada and had a great time, but the fishing was horrible. It was absolutely. I would say that we had one. I would say C minus fishing day. Every other day was an F. It was really, really bad. Hello, LaFord. And I think the reason was we got up there just a little too late in the season. I think that was the reason that, we went to all the spots that we usually go to, and it just, there's a phenomenon called the lake turning over, in which the temperature of the water and everything is inverted, and the oxygen in the water gets all messed up, and the fish become very lazy, and so they don't eat. They're it's almost like they're in a hibernation, and there you go. Rick and Michelle and Salvatore, I'm glad everybody um could make it this evening, and but we had a good time. It was me, my dad, my best friend Doug, and his son, and really, and being that we didn't spend a lot, we did. I mean, we were out in the lake a bit, quite a bit, but we just didn't catch anything. But we went on a couple drives, and we just kind of hung out. And Doug and I fished off the dock one night. It was late at night. It was beautiful out there, just BSing about all sorts of stuff. And we played a card game called 31, which is fun. They have like satellite TV there, so we got to watch some TV. My dad did the cooking. And so it was just kind of a guy's week. I think we all got a lot of sleep, which I think we all needed, so it was good. What's going on, Cherie? But it just, as far as the fishing goes, just didn't work out to our expectations. Just didn't. And so we came home Friday evening. On Saturday, my dad and I went to a football game, the Slippery Rock University football game. That's where he went to school. And then I know some of you do follow me as a friend on Facebook, and you saw me as I charted my trip from Pennsylvania back to Florida. And yes, I did it all in one trip. And I only did it with one stop to get gas. And it was magnificent. And it was really easy, really nice drive on Sunday. And I got here at about 12:30 a Sunday night / Monday morning, just playing some tunes and listened to some football on Sunday evening on the radio. Really, really nice drive, no problem at all. And so I'm back here, and I've been here since then and getting back to work. And of course, we have an episode coming out this Friday. Of course, while I was in Canada, I wrote a post about the recording of the meeting. I wrote that, if you want to know, at the cottages. I wrote it down in the little office area where they had really good Wi-Fi there. and that's where I got it done. So I was just sitting there. The woman who kind of runs the place was there. I was talking to her, and Doug's son was sitting at the table next to me doing some schoolwork. I think that was on Thursday afternoon. And so, what's going on, Bree? Hello, Heather. And that's where I wrote that post that about um, my further insight into the recording of that meeting, which we will talk about in a little bit. As far as some other things, well, I'm sorry to hear that, Bree. Sorry to hear that. Of course, we had the third anniversary episode a week and a half ago, and that was the topic. Of course, Suzanne Lau's case was the topic. Replayed the interview that I did with Mary Lau on the Think Tank on Sunday night, or I should say we had it on Monday night since I was on the road on Sunday night. But 2 nights ago, we had the Think Tank for those premium Patreon members, and that's a case that as it gets farther and farther away from when she disappeared, it's over 21 years now, I'm more and more inclined to believe that it's about time to start opening the periphery of the vision in the case to think that make sure that maybe somebody hasn't been overlooked. Somebody who isn't Richard Condon or his father. Is it possible somebody else could have been involved? So, um, that was kind of a topic of conversation during the think tank, and I did write a Patreon blog concerning Suzanne Lau's disappearance for the Patreon. And if you are a Patreon supporter, then you got to read that. Oh, Jessica, you are familiar with the card game 31, huh, Jessica? Oh yeah, it's a good one. I'd never heard of it before, but Doug and his wife play it with their friends where they live in North Carolina, and he introduced it to us, and we had a good time with it all week. I'm not really generally into card games and things, but it was a good one. It was good. Um, Bree, Jonathan Lorden did an interview with a private investigator who is doing the Jonathan Estes case today. Well, Bree, depending on which private investigator that is, I don't know if I should be excited about that or not. Um, I don't know if I want to get into it right at this second, but that is news to me, and I'm wondering if Melissa Estes, Jonathan's sister, knows about that. Um, because I happen to know that the one private investigator who worked on Jonathan's case, uh, well, didn't do such a great job. I'll just put it. It's about as nicely as I can put it. So I'm not sure what to think about that. What's going on, Whitney? Whitney is in the house. What's going on, Whitney? Um, yeah, Bree, Suzanne. Yeah, I'm going to guess that Susie Lau is not with us anymore, and that is certainly unfortunate. Thank you, LaFord. Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. Wow, Sharon, I used to live in Las Vegas, and I used to play in the poker tournament at Caesar's Palace. I forget what night of that used to be. In fact, I came in fourth place in a poker tournament at Caesar's Palace back. It was a huge tournament back in about 2004, maybe something like that, Sharon. Caesar's Palace, one of my favorite casinos. And so I hope you're having a great time there. It's my home away from home, Las Vegas, my most favorite city in the world. Um, okay, Bree, good to hear that. Um, Bree, James, Michael, Terry, yeah. Bree, I can tell you that I'm sorry to hear that Jonathan Lorden interviewed him. I'm very very sorry to hear that. I don't want to get into it right now without talking to Melissa. Yeah, Cherie. So you also know 31, Cherie. Man, I didn't know it was such a widespread known game, but it was fun. It's really fun to get those cards and get the ace and get 31 on the last card. Somebody knocks and then you get the 31. It's good. It's good. It's a good game. All right, so we talked about Susie Lau, the update episode. I'm wondering, how the update episode came across. Of course, that just came out last Friday. I had recorded it, um, well before I even left for Pennsylvania. Thought we had a lot of good updates there, a lot of different cases to talk about, and of course, the case that sticks out most in my mind, and I even mentioned this on Monday night on the think tank, is you wouldn't think for a case with the McDaniel sisters, it's 40 years old, that you could still be surprised by information that you find out about it. And that was a shocker. When that happened back in July, um, it certainly was a shocker. And even though I did an update on it and told all of you quite a bit, I didn't even tell you. Um, of course, I didn't say the name, this last name that got attached to their name, and I left out some other things. But I thought that was a pretty good update for that. But it's just. Mm, uh, mhm. You love Terry. You know 31 too as well, huh? Okay. Okay. So let's move on to you got to see the update. Austin Pevo. Uh, this is some news that broke while I was in Pennsylvania. It started out there, and then I have talked to Susan a couple times. Of course, I don't know everything. The remains have not been identified, but in talking to Susan, what I've been able to find out is somebody discovered remains. I think that the remains were just happened upon in the on the Fort Hall reservation, and they're being tested right now. Of course, those DNA results are not um, complete, and Susan doesn't know if what kind of condition were they in. Was there any signs of foul play? I'm not sure she knows any of that, but what she did say is that the remains were found in a very remote part of the reservation. And that's about all I know, right at this second. So, once she can tell me more, and if I think that I can pass it on to all of you, I will do that. Um, the thing about that case, of course, is that we're still up in the air. Was there foul play? If you remember, if some of you don't remember the the particulars of it, that he got dropped off at work by Susan, and then there was allegedly no work that day, and then the other people were the guys that were there said he made a phone call and left. And you also remember that what had happened the night before is that a guy that Austin had been friends with for a long time had pulled a knife on him the night before. And of course, there was some suspicion that this guy could have something to do with his disappearance, or was it somebody else, or did Austin just take off? Um, so we just don't know um, what to think right now. But Susan, in my opinion, really does believe that it is Austin's. It's for sure not some animal or anything like that. But I don't think she's been out to where the remains have been found or anything else. So I think that at this point, she is in a wait and see situation, just like the rest of us are, that have found out about that um, about that disappearance. So I'm not sure if I saw that coming or not so soon. Of course, it's a relatively new disappearance in Unfound's world, so maybe this is just the way things were supposed to go in that case. I just really don't know what more to say about it right at this time, but Susan has been very responsive when I've sent her a couple messages when I found out about it, and then I think it was yesterday I sent her a message again if there were any updates, and she didn't have any. So this is, I think, going very slow. Once again, I don't know how. I don't know how the remains were found. Did they get a tip? Did somebody just happen upon them? I don't know, and I'm not even sure if Susan even knows. So that's really all I can say about it. But it does seem that once again, one of Unfound's cases is at least going to be partially solved. What I'm hoping is it doesn't become a situation like Tom Brown's, where there's not enough remains to really be able to determine a cause of death. I hope that is not the case, of course. That would just make everything even more complex in Austin's case, just as it is done in Tom's case. So, but if I hear anything and if I think that it can be made public, or if I see any, public news about her or anything, I will surely post it in the group. And I'm sure if I don't see it, one of you will see it, and you're free to post it as well. Hello, Tamara. No, Tanya, I don't know if I'm going to be dressing up. I haven't dressed up for Halloween for years and years and years and years. So, but that's kind of funny. Um, so that's kind of funny. What else do I want to talk about? I think that maybe I should just take a question right now, because I think the next topic is going to be a little long. Let me move my screens around here for a minute. There we go. Let's see. I have to answer this question just because it's. And once again, you should understand that when I put up the question posts in the group and on the page, it doesn't necessarily have to be true crime related. As long as it's not too personal and it's PG related, it's PG rated, then I will um, answer it. And so Larry had asked me, I might as well answer it. He's asking me, Stretch Armstrong, Evil Knievel, $6 million man, what action figures did you used to have? He also asked me, what school lunchbox did I have? And what was the standard lunch brought from home? Wow. Okay, so I really had to think about this. First of all, I did not have a Stretch Armstrong. I don't remember having a $6 million man. I think I did have one of the bigger G.I. Joe dolls, but I did have that Evil Knievel motorcycle where you kind of wound it up and it would go. And in fact, I think in the most recent Toy Story, Keanu Reeves played a character that was like that same toy, kind of like. I did have one of those as a kid. As a kid, I was mainly into Matchboxes and Hot Wheels. Were my things. I had a huge, and I still do. It's in my parents', or now my dad's attic in um, Pennsylvania. But I had a huge collection of Matchboxes and Hot Wheels. And so I was really into that. I had a Thundershift 500 as a kid. So that's that was mainly those were mainly my toys, you know, as a kid. And my grandfather had actually made me a display case for all of the Hot Wheels and uh, Matchbox cars that I had. That was really really nice. That was on my wall in my room, as a kid. So that's if Larry is watching or if he's going to um, listen to this later. That's um, that's what I was into. And as far as the Ron says I have Hot Wheels too. Hot so cool. Um, but the other thing, as far as a lunchbox goes, I had an NFL lunchbox where on one it was metal going back. That's how far it was. It was metal. On one side, it was the AFC teams. On the other side, it was the NFC teams. And of course, this would have been like 1979, 1980. In fact, it goes back so far, most people don't even realize this, but the Seattle Seahawks used to be in the AFC. When they first came into the league, they were in the AFC. Now they're in the NFC. Well, on my lunchbox, the Seattle Seahawks were in the NFC. They were on the AFC side of the lunchbox. But now, once again, now they're in the NFC because they had to, balance everything out. And what would my mom would pack my lunch. I really, I think it was pretty standard stuff. My mother, I don't think ever got really, really too fancy with it. And I really don't remember packing my lunch really that much anyway. I had a lunchbox. I did it periodically, but I think most of the time I just ate at the cafeteria, the way I remember it, and that was certainly true when I went to high school. So there you go. But Larry, that's a great question. Thank you. The toy question, the lunchbox question. Um, Sheree says, seemed to be a lot of movement in unfound cases lately. I I don't know, Sheree. I just we just try to keep up. Maybe because our eyes are open for them is why it seems, so much is going on. I'm always looking for, of course, Jonathan Estes with the um, Jonathan Estes with the Bobcat being found, etc. Of course, was in the news about a month ago as well. Carrie agrees with that. Little Bit says my one son wants to go to be Groot for Halloween. Well, good luck with that, Little Bit. Tanya asks, how many cases do you look into at one time? Tanya, I would say that I probably am working on 5 cases at once in a various stage, from an initial conversation to getting the episode ready. I have to admit, I don't. It's a little bit like an assembly line, at least a little bit, but it just depends. So I think a good number to pick, Tanya, would be 5. Ron says he had Hot Wheels 2. Um, Little Bit says that Hot Wheels growing up in racetracks. Me too. I love the racetracks. Cherie says I had an Evil Sea toy too, and Sonny and Cher dolls. Okay, Cherie. Layla, I still have my vintage circa 1978 Steve Largent Seahawks T-shirt. Layla, you should know. Growing up, I had a poster of Jim Zorn in my room because I'm athletically left-handed, and he was a left-handed quarterback. Of course, I think he's in the Hall of Fame now. But so he was actually the poster in my room growing up. Layla, Christy, what's going on? Good to see you. Tara remembers pizza burgers at Leechburg High School. That's true. Not a fan of pizza burgers, Tara. Not a fan. Salvatore said, did you hear they arrested the Daytona Beach serial killer here in West Palm Beach the other day? Salvatore, I did hear that. I did read about that, but I cannot say that I spent a lot of time looking over the information. All right, so I got that question out of the way. Let's go back to this. The recording and the record publishing it. Of course, it's been what, 6 days since I wrote that and posted it about how I would not have personally, if I were given the recording, I would not have made it public. I would not have made a transcription of it. I wouldn't have done anything. And I wrote that and posted it in the group. I want to expound on that a little bit. First of all, you have to understand that although I don't talk about it, and I haven't talked about it that much, covering over 140 cases, I have more than once been approached by guests who ended up being on the program that they had recorded telephone calls with persons of interest or people who said things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? I want you to know that has happened, not a lot. I'm going to say it's maybe less than 7 times, probably. So not many, less than 10% of the time, but still 6, 7 times, maybe 5, 6, 7 times. And in all of those cases, or situations, let's put it that way, in all of those situations, the first question I have always asked is, did the person know he or she was being recorded? That is always first. Always. Okay? And it's not necessarily, yes, there is a legal issue because certain states have to be a two-party state. Florida, two-party state. All right? Two-party state. Other states, one-party states. And if you don't know what I mean about that, meaning you just can't, in two-party states, you just can't record a phone call without telling the other person on the line that you're recording it. Whereas in some other states, you're allowed to do that. Okay? Florida, where I live, is a two-party state. But it's not even that. I don't, I have to tell you that although I follow those rules and that law, I don't know how often it's prosecuted. I have no idea. I don't know. But I look at it from a different point of view, and I think this is what I've learned in covering missing persons cases, over 140 of them. People are more likely to say outrageous things and spout off all sorts of different theories and things when they aren't being recorded, in contrast to when they are being recorded. Okay? So even if somebody were to record somebody saying something like I was involved in the disappearance and it's not, and the person who's saying this doesn't know they were being recorded, I don't know if I'm supposed to believe that or not. I really don't know. Because people sometimes just say things. And I think that, a very good example is if you've ever seen a movie, All the President's Men, it's an old movie from the 1970s with Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman playing Woodward and Bernstein. And I'm not going to go into everything, but there was something called the Canuck letter, and it happens toward the latter part of the movie, probably in the last quarter of the movie, where frankly this guy was trying to claim that he wrote this political letter that was a sham. He was telling this to a woman trying to impress her. Okay? And when called on it, he said that he never said that. Well, it turns out that he did say that, but it turns out he didn't write it. And see, this is what I worry about when it comes to people saying things when they think they aren't being recorded. They're liable to say anything. Anything. And it's just not the legal stuff. It's the the tendency for people to make stuff up if they don't think they're being recorded. That is a well-known part of human nature. So that's another reason that if somebody tells me, well, I recorded this conversation, I got that person on the phone, they said this, and I said, well, did they know they were being recorded? And they say no, and I said, well, I'm just not inclined to believe it if they didn't know they were being recorded. Okay? That's the first point. That's an additional point to everything that I wrote last Thursday that it was posted about not using things that are recorded. Not only, once again, regarding going back to the Tom Brown meeting from in August, I believe it was unethical for whoever recorded it to have done so. And I think it's unethical for the record to get it and publicize it the way they did. All right. On top of that, I've had an opportunity to use phone recordings in my program and I have declined. Okay. I have declined to do that for the express reason that not once has when I've asked a guest about it have they ever said, "Oh yes, the person knew they were being recorded." Because if they were to say yes, then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if that's true. And if I can't prove that, then the recording's not getting used either. So I've had an opportunity to use recorded things that people didn't know they were being recorded. I declined. There's something else on top of this, and having worked, let me just read here for a second. Noah Bree, I didn't know about that. Tamara says, Australia, it's illegal to record someone's conversation without permission unless it's in a public surrounding, but it's a touchy subject. Well, once again, it's not even, Tamara, as I stated, it's not even a legal thing. It's an ethical thing. It's ethics. Especially in a situation like that meeting where there was no allegation that anything illegal was going, it wasn't some like reporter was going undercover to record some illegal drug operation. That's totally different. Totally different. And that is surely a viable way to catch people and to do reporting like 60 Minutes used to do. They don't do so much of that now, but back in the 70s and 80s, some of the reporters would go undercover and because they were trying to catch something being done illegally. None of that in this meeting. This was a civic. People were being informed about a case. There were police officers there. There were lawyers there. There was the family there. There was no allegation that anything illegal was going to be going on in that meeting. So there's no reason to record it surreptitiously. So I understand what you're saying, Tamara, but I'm against it more from a ethics point of view. Once again, as a reporter. Susan, you love all the President's Men. Fantastic movie. Susan says, reason I got interested in journalism came all from the President's Men. That's interesting, Susan. I love to hear that. Carrie says, people tend to brag or exaggerate facts if they think it couldn't come back to bite them later. Absolutely true, Carrie. Absolutely true. Cherie, I think she got what she, okay, you're still talking, okay. You're talking about the Skylar Richardson, and I really don't want to get off on that tangent. Okay, so there's that. There's another part of this, though, as well. And I realize that here in podcast world, and I think that I have been fairly vocal about this, of course, plagiarism and things, is that podcasting is still a little of the wild, wild west when it comes to journalism. I think that there are a lot of things that people get away with in podcasting that a news editor for the New York Times, LA Times, Washington Post, or anywhere else might not get away with. And I'm not saying from a legal point of view or anything, but having worked with a newspaper, the Tribune Review, in Pittsburgh for a year in 2018, how do I want to put this? The standards that they have for reporting, I wouldn't say they're higher. They are different than my own standards for Unfound. Okay? And I know you disagree with me, Cherie. I know. I know you do. But here's what I know. If the Tribune Review in Pittsburgh, were to ever receive a recording of a case in the Pittsburgh area where a family got together with Pittsburgh police and the district attorney in Pittsburgh or something, and that meeting was recorded secretly, And that recording was given to the Tribune Review, a well respected regional newspaper that's been around for a long time, does sports, politics, everything else, has a very good track record, all professionals, etc. I'm telling you, there is no way they accept that recording. No way. Zero. Zero, zero chance that the Tribune Review would ever take a recording from something that went on in the Pittsburgh area, like what happened in Hemphill County, and publicized it. And on top of everything else, keeping the person who recorded it secret. The Tribune Review would never do that. They would never do that. Now, if it was something illegally that was going on or something, then maybe they might. If they could prove that everybody that was recorded in this illegal activity or something, and then of course they would publicize it. But something that was a meeting that was just the police informing a family of what's going on and everything, they would never do that. They would never ever do that. And Carrie's agreement. I don't know many papers even around here would publish that. Would not happen. Exactly true. Exactly true. And I've not, the writer that I used to work with, Stephen Huba there, I've not contacted him regarding that, but I'm pretty sure I know what he'd say if he got something like that. He would be very, very dubious as to the source and everything else. And the reason I know that I can also say that is because, in those articles that I worked on with the Trib to publicize missing persons cases in Western Pennsylvania, Southwestern Pennsylvania, over the course of last year, frankly, um, the Trib shied away from information that I personally, doing Unfound, would have publicized. Okay? They play things much more conservatively than I would. Okay? And that's their right. It's their publication. They can do what they want. Okay? I think it's a mistake, but it's it's their jobs, it's their money, it's their reputation, everything else, and I just have to live with it. And just like they wouldn't be able to tell me what to do with Unfound. But just on that alone, I know that they would never take a recording of the police talking to a family in a meeting, informing a family about the progress of a case, and publicize it. They would never do that. Instead, what might happen is if the Trib found out that meeting was going to happen, they might send a reporter to it and see if the reporter could sit in and report on it. And maybe then the reporter would get permission to record it, or at least get permission to take notes or something. That's how the Trib would handle it. Any other way, they might report that a meeting happened, but they surely would not take any recordings of anything. Never. Never. And I think that the record in Canadian is much more like the Trib than it is closer to a podcast. And so that's another reason that I am personally stunned that the record has gone as far as it has done. That's another reason that I'm very surprised that is what they decided to do. Mm. Um, so there you go. And don't get me wrong, I realize that I am in the information business, okay? And that recording is certainly information. It certainly is. I don't know what it proves or anything, but what I know is a large majority of those people who showed up there that day did not expect to be recorded. And that alone is enough for me to not publish something. Um, what if Cherise asked me, what if their sheriff was under attack and the editor of that paper was pro-sheriff? You have to factor in all the facts. I don't. I really don't care what the facts were, Cherie. I don't care. There's nothing in that meeting that it was a public meeting. I wouldn't say it was, I'm not saying anybody could attend, but there is certainly, there's certainly nothing going on there that was secretive or anything. Okay? There certainly nothing was. And I realize what you're saying, Sheree, but you know I'm not going into that. I'm just not. I can say, I can just make a blanket statement. I don't care if it's in Texas, California, Florida. I don't care what disappearance case it is. I don't care, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. All right? If people are going to surreptitiously record meetings of police and family and attorneys and everything else surreptitiously, then I'm not having anything to do with that recording. Okay? I'm not. I'm just not. I will do other things. I'm not doing that. Okay? I just don't want to have anything to do with that. I know all of the I know all of the rumors. I know all of the stuff. And I'm not getting into it. The reasons, who might have done it, why the record might have published it, and everything else. I'm not touching it. Okay? Not on this program, not in an official capacity. Okay? I have my personal opinions because I'm a human about all of it. But professionally, as a reporter, doing this program, trying to tell you the right things to do with information and how to gather it and everything else, I would never have anything to do with that recording. No matter who I thought was guilty, no matter who I thought was innocent, no matter who I thought was rumorizing and everything else, I just wouldn't have anything to do with it. Because I believe that that recording was gathered unethically. Okay? That's it. That's it. Once again, though, if it was somebody who was like undercover and was going to meet a crooked politician and they're sitting somewhere and there's a hidden camera, like has been done many times, and they get somebody on the record saying something illegally and they go into it expecting that to happen because they know this person is a lawbreaker, totally different. But when it's just going to be a meeting where police are and the sheriff's office, the Rangers, Attorney General informing a family of the progress that they've made and what they're going to do with the case, that's totally out of bounds in my world. Totally out of bounds. Jill is double fisting. Okay, Jill. I don't know what that means. All right, so that's I would say something else. And this being that I know a little bit, being that we have 7 books out now, and there have been transcriptions of all of the interviews to that point that I've done, and I can't thank the transcribers enough. I know all about transcriptions too, and taking recording and making it into print. And I think maybe even some of you have read the books so far know that sometimes transcriptions get edited for content in the books because sometimes we talk, and to put that talk into writing, it doesn't quite make sense. So I often find myself, once the transcribers put it in the correct form and they do a fantastic job, I will go read through them and see if each sentence makes sense. If it doesn't, I will clean it up for content. Okay, I will do that. All right? But the difference is I know that people can read the books and then go listen to the interview to find out the exact wording, because what I do is, in looking at a transcript, sometimes people don't talk in a way that can be understood when it's read. This is another reason that I worry about the record just issuing a transcript without allowing everybody to hear what was recorded. Whereas, at least with the transcriptions for Unfound, if something is unclear, you read a transcription in one of the books and it still seems a little hazy to you, you can go listen to the audio for free on iTunes, Podomatic, Spotify, wherever, and listen to it and hear the person's inflection of their voice and everything to see to further, clear up, the puzzle, the vagueness that you have in your mind. You can't do that with the record transcript. Why? Because they won't make the recording available. My opinion is they won't make the recording available because then that will expose who actually recorded it. And of course, the record is um, not disclosing who recorded it. And they realize that by releasing the audio, once you start listening to the audio and being able to hear whose voices are loud, whose voices are soft, meaning the loud ones are close to the recorder, the soft ones are away from the recorder, and being that there were people there, they'll be able to remember where everybody was sitting in the room, and then that person who recorded they'll be able to narrow in on that person. That's the reason the recording's not being released. But without the recording, the transcription means nothing. Nothing. Means nothing. All right. Let's move on to something else. Speaking of books, season 2, volume 1 is out. And I'm going to be working on the print edition within the next week or so. Need to make a print cover, which is not as easy as it might seem. And then of course the guests for the cases that are in that book will be getting theirs for free, and of course transcribers will be getting theirs for free as well. So if you don't know that, season 2 volume 1 has been out. Book's been out for about 3 weeks. I hope you will check it out. It's cheap, only $2.99. um Next thing, I know that Jill says, meaning I am in 2 listening arenas. Okay. Okay, kind of like surround sound or something, Jill. Um, Looking forward to Friday's podcast. Thank you, Trina. I want to talk a little bit very shortly about Stormy Dorsey, former guest. She is the sister of Brandon Williams, who went missing in Nashville, Tennessee in 2014. Um, she had brain surgery within the last couple weeks. Out of nowhere, she started having headaches. I guess that she fainted, and it ended up that she had a brain tumor, and she got it taken out. But and she's posted. I'm not revealing anything that's private. She's posted all of this on Facebook, but I want all of you to know about it. That it seems like this kind of cancer that she has, even though this tumor was taken out, and of course she can write, she can talk, and everything else, this is a kind of cancer that often comes back. I don't know what the kind of prognosis is. I've not spoken to her at length about it or anything, but she posted what kind of cancer it is. I looked it up on Wikipedia just to see it, and it's the kind of cancer that I think you can live with for a while, for years and years and years, as long as one of the tumors does not pop up in an area where they can't operate. Okay? But this is very sudden for her. I think that she was in perfect health until this all happened. She's a very young girl. I think she's just in her 20s. And just sad. Very sad. So I'm hoping, as I think maybe a lot of you have already figured out, that I am not the strongest religious person. I'm not an atheist or anything. I believe that Jesus walked the earth and all those things, but I'm not overtly religious. I don't go to church. I was raised Catholic. I don't go to mass, etc., etc., etc. But I know all of you, many of you, are very religious in power of prayer and all of that. So I would ask you to um, keep her in your thoughts and prayers. I know thoughts and prayers has become a cliche these days, and a lot of people make fun of that. But I would certainly appreciate if um, you could give her all the help you could spiritually for that, because I don't like to classify my guests, but Stormy is certainly One of my favorite guests who've been on the program. Um, I've talked a lot to her, even well after she was on the program. And it just, I feel very sad for her. I know she's a fighter and everything else. But I'm sure that she would appreciate all of your help. You can find her in the discussion group if you are in there. She does have a Facebook page and everything. If you'd like to contact her and give her some support, I would deeply, deeply appreciate it. And I just want to remind you, we've already lost. Unfound is only 3 years old. We've already lost one guest. In Jessica Curtis, she committed suicide last October, October 2018. And I spoke to her, I think, 2 days before she took her life. I think she took her life on a Tuesday. I think I talked to her on that Sunday before. So we've already lost one guest. You know, we don't need to lose any more from cancer, suicide, or anything else. Okay, I don't want that to happen. So I would appreciate um, all the help, once again, spiritually, religiously, metaphysically, whatever you believe in, to help Stormy pull through this. Okay, I would deeply appreciate that. Okay. Next, um, there's things going on in the Bobby Ann Campbell case. Of course, her daughter Stephanie was the guest for that episode, and that came out last year, or maybe at the beginning of this year. I'd have to check, but it wasn't recently. But if you will remember, she left her daughter Stephanie with a friend, and she took off. Stephanie was with this guy who was from England, a Brit who was in the United States, and later her car was found near a river in the Salt Lake City general area. Within the last week, and maybe they're still even diving now. It has to be cold going into that river in Salt Lake City now in September. But divers have been in the river near where her car was found. Some things have been found so far. I don't know what it means. You have to remember this is a river. But I have it written down that they found some keys, they found an earring, and they found some carpet. Jessica Curtis was a guest for the Tyler Stice case. That episode came out near the end of 2017. Um, once again, I think it's great. I think that for a case that is as old as Bobby Campbell's, over 20 years old, for divers to be looking in that river finally, and that it's making the news in the Salt Lake City area, and and that I think that's all fantastic. Okay, I think it's great. I wish all the other cases that were that old or older were having getting all that kind of work done. But we have to remember this is a river, and a lot of things end up in the river for all sorts of different reasons, by on purpose, by accident. We just don't know. Um, I'm not sure what to make of these things that they found, and I think that they should continue to look. I completely support the scuba divers scouring that river. Okay, I want you to know that. My personal opinion, though, is Bobby Campbell did not end up in the river. That's my personal what I think I understand about that case. Um, I yeah, sure, you're right. They don't know for sure those are her things. Of course, they'll try to figure it out. And that's certainly a worthy pursuit. But to believe that her car would be parked so close to the river, and then she went into the river, um, and there's no allegations that she committed suicide. I think it's fair to believe that this guy that she was involved in might have done something to her. I mean, would he really park her car right near the river? And I'm not sure that totally makes sense. But I fully support them doing it. because I could be wrong. You know, what do I know? But the way I looked, the way I understand that case, I'm not inclined to believe that she went into the river, but she could have. And if scuba divers are going to put in their time doing it, then I support them, and I hope they certainly do find things in there that point, to a solution in her disappearance. Certainly, I do. It's just not where my mind is analyzing it. What everything Stephenie uh, told me and told all of you in the interview I did with her. That's all. But it's great. In fact, you'll remember earlier this year, they even did a reenactment of her disappearance, which you know, I worry about reenactments because I think it puts false memories in people's heads. But I guess if it raises the attention, the publicity, of course, of a disappearance that's very very old, then I guess that's a positive. I once again just worry about people misremembering things if they see something on TV. So, so there you go. That's what's going on. So we got a lot of things going on. Of course, we had of course Austin Pevo. What's going on there? We had what happened in Jonathan Estes' case within the last month, and so we have Bobby Campbell's case. So Cherie, I guess I have to agree with you. It does seem like there are some things going on in cases that Unfound is covered. So I guess you're right, Cherie. I guess I didn't quite think about it that way, but I have to agree with you on that. Cherie says that's one of those cases where law enforcement didn't want the podcast to happen. Yeah. I don't specifically remember that, Cherie, but that's certainly possible. I mean, it happens. It happens more than probably the listeners would realize. So that's possible. I don't specifically remember it. I have to admit, at this point, Cherie, I'm at a point where the only cases I remember where police um, told a guest not to do the interview, or those guests who then decided not to do the interview. Those are the cases I remember. Um, you heard him. He said I was right. Or someone write that down. Okay, Cherie. Okay, I see where you're going. I see you working. So, and I've not talked to Stephenie about any of this. I've not talked to her recently, so I don't have any behind the scenes information or anything like that. At this point, regarding the scuba divers and everything, I know as much as you do. And, if I feel the need that, to contact Stephenie to talk to her about it, I will. Right at this point, I really don't feel like I need to. If she wants me to say something or, talk to me about something regarding all of this, she can reach me, obviously. She and I are on very, very good terms, I think. Um, we're already an hour in, and I still have a long way to go. I hope you all are comfortable because we're not stopping in an hour tonight because there are a few things that I want to cover here. Next, the discussion group. I don't know if all of you noticed, but the discussion group now has over um, 6,000 people in it, 6,000 members. Completely crazy. Completely crazy. I can remember when there were 62 people in there. And we just went over 6,000, I think, within the last few days. And I hope that everybody enjoys the discussion group. I know that I have been told many times over the last, I guess it got started, sometime time later in 2016, that it's one of the most well run, most disciplined, most, PG rated, no outrageousness, one of the best ones that's out there. Um, you know, no craziness, no swearing, no, dirty arguments or anything like that. Okay, and that's the way I like it, and that's the way we're going to keep it. Even though these days, complete control of what happened here. Did you lose me? Let me see something very quickly. Okay. I don't know. It's hold on one second if you could. Oh no, you got me. Okay, you can. Okay, you can see me. It just the thing was blinking there for a second. Heather and Carrie run keep a very tight ship, and they know my expectations for the group. You know, I have no problem them just kicking people out. None, none. You know, I think that we allow people's opinions and things to be stated. But if you're going to start bringing in theories with no backup or anything like that, you're out. You know, you're out. If the arguments get too wild back and forth, they know to just cut it off. You know, no more comments on a particular post and everything. We're looking more toward the long term health of the group. We are not looking for short term, hysteria and drama or anything else. We're always thinking long term at Unfound, and um, that's the way it's always going to stay. You know, so and I appreciate. Um, yeah, Heather says we keep all the drama in the admin messages. That's surely true. That's surely true. Um, but so I couldn't I think that the reason people even all almost 3 years later come to the group is because they know things are going on there. They know that discussions are happening. Now, of course, Tom Brown's case has brought a lot of people to that, but over 6,000 people. Yeah, I'm going to say probably 500 people have come to the group because of Tom Brown's case. But the other 5,500 have come there for all other reasons. And I couldn't be more pleased with that. And the reason I think people come there, once again, is because they know, they hear good things about it. We're not there to hide anything. Of course, it's a private group. Nothing can be shared and everything. But, um, you know, the discussion that goes on there, it happens in a way in which we just take for granted it could be public as well. All right. The reason it's a private group is because we want control of people who can get into the group, and it keeps trolls out. That's the main reason. Not because we're ashamed of what we're saying there. Okay. Not because of that. The reason the group is private is because we want to keep as many trolls out as possible. People, and we still get them once in a while, people advertising their own work. They get in there, come check out my website. Um, Keeping the group private um, keeps those types of people out. Kristen asks, do you know enough about your followers to know the age of where they are following? They look, meaning, are they we investigators, writers, law enforcement, know a missing person, reporters, gen pop, etc. Um, Kristen, here's what I can tell you about. I know that Unfound's audience is 80% women, which is not unusual. I would say most other true crime podcasts are the same way. Generation Y, True Crime Garage, and all the others. I think that the audience is 80% women, and I'm not getting into the probable reasons. We've talked about that before. As far as professions and things, Kristen, I don't know. Uh, anybody is allowed to be in there as long as they behave themselves. We have law enforcement officers in there. We have reporters in there. We have private investigators in there, and we have accountants and engineers and all other types of people in there as well. Everybody's welcome as long as they behave themselves. Um, okay. Um, Carrie, come in and spam rumor and shuts down their pages. I roll. Okay. Yeah. Okay, Carrie. All right, so I couldn't be more excited about the um, what is going on in the group. Just could not be more excited regarding that. And I thank you all for making the group what it is. It is now a place that people want to be because they know we're posting about all, you find out information about missing persons cases first there. And that's what I always envisioned. And of course, talking about the cases that Unfound covers. Let's move on to this. And like I said, we still got a ways to go here. There was an article in the Atlantic that I saw that dealt with truck drivers make great serial killers. I posted it. It was maybe a couple weeks ago, but I felt that I needed to talk about it a little bit more because I think that um, we can learn something from it, even though they're talking about serial killers, not necessarily disappearances. There is a statistic in it that says that in 1965, 91% of murders were solved, whereas in 2017, the most recent data, or is it data, only 61% of murders in the United States are now solved. And they're saying, why is that? Well, and if you read the article, it's not a very long article, and it's still in the group if you'd like to go read it, or you can just do a search for like truck drivers and serial killers, and you'll probably find it. Um, they're asking why is it that less murders are getting solved, even though the murder rate has come down. Why are less murders getting solved? Why have we gone from 91% to 61%? I mean, that's a pretty huge drop. And couple of, I guess, criminal scientists who study this type of stuff, you look at those stats and say, well, at any one time, there could be 2,000 to 3,000, 4,000 serial killers at work. If you look at those statistics, um, and the reason the truck drivers are thrown in there is because they're very mobile, and if they are a serial killer, they could commit a crime here in Florida now. They could be in Michigan next week, and as long as they vary up their modus operandi, they could never be caught. And so, part of this was also looking at those types of professions where serial killers might be most common, and truck drivers is one of the ones right at the top. Now, which is weird because, or interesting, because both of my brothers were truck drivers at one time. Uh, but let me see here. LaFord says, "I love that this is a grown folks chat group. No petty arguments. We all can agree to disagree here." We tried to do that, LaFord. And yes, Shuri, thank you for publicizing the think tank. Please, everybody, take a long look at that post that Shuri just posted. Um, you know, so in reading that article, I started kind of going back through um, Unfound's disappearance to think about if any of the suspects in those disappearances were truck drivers, any possible suspects. Kelly Sims is one of them. If you remember, she was in a truck with a guy. Of course, he claims he let her out and she started walking toward a bar and she disappeared. Well, he was a truck driver. And of course, there's a few different possibilities in that case with Kelly Sims. But there is one where a truck driver could be a suspect. But other than that, I think, being that we talked about Susie Lau earlier in this, I believe that Richard Condon's father drove a truck as well. Not maybe an 18 wheeler or something, but he drove a truck like delivery, or I seem to remember something like that. So I guess you could look at that. But really, in going down through Unfound's cases, we don't have too many where a truck driver is a suspect. I don't know what to make of that. Is that an anomaly of some type? Because even, I mean, surely we have more police officers who are suspects in these disappearances than we do truck drivers. And that number continues to hold at about 10%. I've been saying that for over a year. About every 10th case or something, we have a police officer that could be a suspect. We have a police officer that could be a suspect in Jonathan Estes's case. I think we're going to be covering another case within the next month. Where is it? Out of Kentucky or Tennessee, where a police officer, a sheriff's deputy, could be a suspect. Of course, we know everything about Tom Brown's case. People think that there should be, some of the sheriff or the deputies could be a suspect in that one. We know about Nikki McCown's case. We know about Robin Abrams' case. So there are way more law enforcement officers who are considered suspects in Unfound's cases than truck drivers. I think that's interesting. Being the truck drivers are mentioned so much in this article at theatlantic.com. Travis Morrow, wasn't that a truck driving situation? Well, he was driving a pickup truck, Travis was, but I don't know if there is a truck driver who is a suspect in that case, Cherie. I know that we talked about the woman that he was going to see. I know we talked about that guy that kind of lived in the general area, but I don't remember that guy was a truck driver. But, and when I say truck driver, I mean like big rig, like CDL license. I'm not saying like pickup truck or something, or like FedEx driver or something. Let me see here. Michelle says Sheree is our administrator. She has the power to stop the spammers and police discussion. Well, she does hear. She does hear, Michelle, but in the group, the admins are myself, Heather, Carrie, and actually a guy who actually technically started the group, and his name is Jeremiah. Sheree is not, I don't think, is on the admin list for the group, but she's surely in control of keeping people out for this these shows that we do every Wednesday night, and actually she has control. Well, not anymore for the Facebook stuff for the think tank because we do that on Facebook now. That's all right, Sheree. You're allowed to be confused. But I would like to say one more thing. As far as defining serial killers, this the definition I think that the public has regarding serial killers is vastly different from what the FBI uses, for example. We as the public, even myself, when we start thinking about serial killers, we start thinking about, 5, 10, 20 people murdered by the same guy. Whereas in FBI terms, all it takes is two. All it takes is two murders for somebody to become a serial killer. So, in those terms, I think it's very easy to understand that there might be that many, mostly men, who are out there who have never been caught. Okay? That would not surprise me at all. But I just don't want everybody to get the idea that they're saying, well, there are, 2,000 to 3,000 killers out there who have killed like 20, 10, 20 people. I surely don't believe that. All right? I don't think that there's any evidence to support that. We just have to remember what serial killer means. And when we think serial killer, we think Zodiac killer, we think the original Night Stalker, we think Ted Bundy, we think Gary Ridgway, etc., 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 etc. Whereas the kind of serial killer they're talking about is that guy that has just murdered a couple people. We don't know the name. There is no, messages to the police or to a newspaper like in the Zodiac killer's case, or in the original Night Stalker's case. There's nothing like that. So the term public or the term serial killer can be a little misleading. And I would just remind you that if you're going to read that article. Now, as far as why the the crime rate, even though it's come down, that murders aren't getting solved as much. if that number is true, that it's gone from 91 in 1965 to 61 in 2017. I, the person who wrote the article seems confused by it. I'm not. The truth is, the population in the United States has changed. The way the demographic, where people live, has changed since 1965. We have a much more city-based population than we did in 1965. Okay, so if there were murders happening in the United States, there was more of an even distribution of them across the United States because the population was more evenly distributed. We had way more farms, way more farmers, way more people living off the land, etc. Whereas with computers, technology, the internet, the highway system, cars can, we can more easily travel from one um, area of the country to another and everything else. And people, I think people are more into convenience, so they like having a grocery store right down the street instead of having to drive 30 minutes. We've become a more urban-based population. And what has happened because of that? Well, those murders that used to happen out in the country, in the hinterlands, I guess you might call, that, there might be one a year. Well, all of those murders that used to happen in the country are now, have moved into the cities. And so it's hard to solve a lot of murders when there are a lot of murders happening in one specific area. It's much easier to solve murders or any type of crime if they are more evenly spread out over, an area, especially the size of the United States. But you bring more people into the cities, and I don't care about ethnicities, race, I don't care about that. White people in the cities, black people in the cities, Hispanics, Asians, I don't care. They all commit crimes. Um, but you do that, and when you have people living closer to each other, it's much easier to kill each other too. And that's why I believe that murders aren't solved as much as they used to be. I think that there are just more murders happening in much more concentrated areas, and frankly, the police may be a little overwhelmed. I think so. Um, and Michelle says, which makes more suspects in each case as well. That's certainly true, Michelle. Um, that's certainly true as well. So, every statistic that you will ever see is shown, even though the United States, at least as far as industrialized countries go, is a violent country. The United States was a much more violent country when I was born in 1970. You can check that out for yourself. Um, a place like New York City it was a nightmare in 1970. Now it's one of the safest cities in the United States. Things have changed. Now, do we still have problems? Chicago, um, Baltimore, some other cities, yes. But overall, the murder rate and the violent crime rate in the United States is down. What is up? Drug use is up. Suicides are up. Missing persons are up. But violent crime, the way we understand it, is down. Even though the solving of those violent crimes is down as well. So I think it's a really good article. I think you should read it. I think that it can be applied to what we do with Unfound, with missing persons cases. So I would recommend that you go find that article. Once again, I think if you go to Google and just do a search for truck drivers and serial killers, that article at theatlantic.com will pop up, and so you can read it. Once again, I think it's some really good reading. Even though it doesn't come to a ton of conclusions or anything, but there's some good statistics in there, and I think that there will be some points for you to think about. Let's talk about, do I have any other questions that people asked me tonight? I don't think so. Let me just look. Let me just take a moment. I don't think so. Okay. I want to talk very quickly about how this guy's last name was William Molt, Moldt. He disappeared in 1997. Well, his disappearance was solved within the last couple weeks due to Google Maps. It turns out that who lived in the area where the car was found was looking at using Google Satellite View and just happened to see a vague outline of a car in a canal um, down. I think this was down in the Palm Beach area of Florida, down near Miami. And police went over there, pulled the car out, and what did they find? They found this guy, William Molt, who had disappeared in 1997. And it shows that car, at least as far as clarity of image goes, the car has been there for a while, and it is believed that back in 1997, I think he was out drinking, or probably drinking and driving, got lost, went into there, drove into the water, and drowned. That's what they believe happened at this point. I'm sure they're going to check into that to see if any foul play was involved. But this was solved due to Google Satellite View. Now, what I think is interesting is this is not the first time this has happened. As soon as I read that story, I was reminded of a story out of Byron Township, Michigan. And this happened in November of 2015, so roughly not quite 4 years ago. There was a guy, his name was David Lee Niles, older guy, who had disappeared on October 11th, 2006. Just vanished, him and his car. Well, what happened was that somebody in his car, somebody was putting up Christmas decorations at a church, and the person was up in a lift. Person looked over at this pond that was next to the church, saw this car under the water. This happened in November 2015. They went in, pulled the car out. David Lee Niles was in it. It was his car, and it is not believed that there was any foul play at all. They believe that maybe he had a heart attack or he was drinking. He did have some health issues, and he might have passed out. Car went off the road, ran into the pond, sunk down to the bottom of it, and he drowned. Or maybe he might have even been dead before the car hit the water. But his car sat there 9 years before it was found. But if you go, and if you have like not the regular Google Satellite View that you can just go for free, but what is that called? What's that program called? I'm gonna have to look at it real quick. Google Earth. If you get the actual Google Earth program, you can actually go back and see his car sitting there before it was found. And it's fast. Those types of things just fascinating. So here he is. Here his car was on a satellite image, and just nobody saw it. Same way with Google Earth Pro. Thank you, Carrie. Same way with William Molt. You can see the picture of his car, and that's of course how his was found. Somebody actually looking at the website. Whereas William Molt's or David Niles's was found by this guy on a lift, but still, you could go to Google's satellite image and see his car. It's just at that point nobody had found it yet. Here's what I'm pretty sure of. If we were able to scour the entire United States, inch by inch by inch by inch by inch, or ever, I'm sure that there are other cars that are submerged that are part of disappearance cases. Pretty sure. Very, very sure. Undoubtedly sure. It's just that they haven't been found yet. I'm sure that there are vehicles underwater with bodies in them, maybe due to murder, maybe due to people just driving off, fainting, drinking and driving, going off, and, going into a canal, going into a lake, going into a river. And those images are there for everybody to see. It's just nobody has seen them yet. In fact, I'm now thinking just a few years ago, 4 years ago maybe, there was a woman who disappeared in Tampa. She was coming home. She was going home from Ybor City, and she disappeared. And what they ended up a few days later, a guy was taking his boat out from a boat launch, and his boat hit something under the water. He was like, what the heck's that? Here, this woman, I think that she was on drugs. She actually drove off the boat launch and drowned. That's what happened. So these things happen. Um, Carrie saying, a friend of mine told me of a case that loggers was clearing out a plot of property, found a truck with a missing person that was still in the truck. He had been missing beyond a year. I believe it. There was a case here in Texas, but she was found within a couple weeks, drove straight into a lake. I think these things are more common than we think. And although I don't think that any of the cases that Unfound is covered happen. In fact, I always think about that with every case in which a person and his or her car disappeared. I think about those cases. Uh, that comes to mind every time. Maybe like Eric Frank's case, for example, or Jeff Joseph's, where he and his vehicle went missing. I don't think that that has happened in any of Unfound's cases, but I'm sure there's going to be a first time. One more thing about William Moult, though, the guy who was just found here recently. You have to understand something, and I think this also makes it very interesting. At the time that he went into that canal, none of those houses and everything were there. So it's amazing to me that the roads were there and the development was just starting. The water was there. He goes into the water. So all those houses were built in the area, and they were built right around where this car was, and nobody saw it the entire time. That's the amazing part to me. That all those construction trucks and everything going in and out there, not one of them happened to see the car. And I don't know how deep it is. It may be very deep. It may be 30 feet deep there. I don't know, which then would explain it. But on the other hand, you can see it from a satellite. So the car couldn't have been too deep. Couldn't have been too deep. But so when you look at that, if you don't know about that story, go look at it, and you're going to see William Moult's car there and those houses right there. Well, when he went into the water, none of those houses were there. It's a very new housing development. It looks very, very nice, too. All right, we're going an hour and a half, so let's wrap this up. Let's just go right to, yeah, sure. A girl in Montana was missing for about 4 to 6 months, was found in a river in her car. Yes, I know. Yep, it happens a lot. Happens a lot. Nikki says, I remember a case with a woman who got pulled over and the cop let her go after she was driving the wrong way. They found her in a car, a body of water. That kind of, I vaguely remember that as well, Nikki. Nick Carey says, Google Earth Pro is one of the first places I check with every case I listen to. And I have Google Earth Pro, and I use it once in a while as well, Carrie. Okay, let's talk about Friday's case. It is the disappearance of Typhenie Johnson from Euless, Texas on October 10th, 2016. This is an episode I am calling Trial by Jury, and the guest for the episode is her aunt, Janelle Hoffeld. Now, why it's being called Trial by Jury is because the person who caused Typhenie's disappearance went on trial in August. He was found guilty of aggravated kidnapping, and he was sentenced to life in prison. And I'm very happy that I was able to get Janelle on to do her interview a couple weeks ago after the trial was over. So I think the timing really works out. The trial happens, and now you're going to hear from Typhenie's aunt talk about, when Typhenie disappeared, and then about the trial itself. So his name is Chris Revel. He and Typhenie were having an argument in her apartment complex, but her brother was watching the argument. Typhenie and Chris went around a corner to continue arguing. Asher got a little suspicious. Once he gets down there and goes around that corner, he sees Christopher shutting the trunk of his car, but Typhenie is nowhere to be seen. Chris gets in his car. He takes off. Chris calls him, or Asher, the brother, calls Chris. Hey, where's Typhenie? Chris doesn't want to talk to him. Asher calls 911. The police show up. An hour and a half later, Chris does come back to the apartment complex. Of course, Typhenie's still not been found. And at that point, in 2016, Chris right away was charged with aggravated kidnapping. And that is what he was eventually convicted of. And he's going to spend life in prison. Of course, the main point, though, is he's not given up the information as to what he did for Typhenie and where he put her. You know, the other tough part about this is that Typhenie's brother Asher knew something was going on within a minute. And still, Typhenie's case is still unsolved. At least finding her part is unsolved. We talk so much about these cases, about how minutes and hours can mean so much. Well, here is a situation where a member of a family acted as quickly as he could, and still Typhenie went missing. Amazing. It just doesn't seem possible, but it is. And the other tough point that you will hear in this interview is that they were able to track Chris through phone records, through pinging of his phone after he left the apartment complex to the point that he came back. And still they haven't been able to find Typhenie. That's what also makes this case very, very perplexing. But once again, Typhenie Johnson disappeared October 10th, 2016 from Euless, Texas, Euless. It's kind of a suburb of Fort Worth. The episode is called Trial by Jury because Chris was judged by a jury of his peers and found guilty of not murder, of aggravated kidnapping, not of murder or manslaughter, of aggravated kidnapping, sentenced to life, and the aunt, Janelle Hoffeld, will be the guest. Now, the reason, yes, he was charged, Trina, and convicted. The other big deal about this case is that it is believed that Chris Revel did this before. 10 years before Typhenie disappeared. In 2006, he was dating a young woman. Her name was Taliba, Taalibah, Islam. And she disappeared under very similar circumstances while dating Chris. Now, he's never been made to answer for that disappearance, but the facts are somewhat similar. And it is not believed that Typhenie ever knew that Chris had been involved with Taliba Islam. Her aunt does not believe that Typhenie had ever even heard of Taliba Islam. But being that we just talked about serial killers, at least in the FBI definition, I'm inclined to believe that Chris Revel is a serial killer, making Taliba Islam disappear in 2006 and then causing Typhenie Johnson's disappearance in 2016. And I will even go into even further. Given those facts, I'm inclined to believe that he might have caused some other unknown, at least unknown at this time, probably at least one other woman to go missing as well, that we just don't know about right at this time. But that is going to be Friday's case, and I hope you will tune in. It will come out at 2 p.m. Eastern on Friday. So I think that's going to conclude the show. We had a lot to talk about. We talked about me being back in Florida, as you can see. Talked about my Canada trip. It was good except for the fishing. The 3rd anniversary episode, the update episode. We talked about Austin Pevo. We talked once more about the recording of the meeting in Canadian Texas and the ethics of that. We talked about Season 2, Volume 1 ebook is now out. We talked about Stormy Dorsey. I hope you'll be sending all of her support for what she's going through right now. We talked about Bobby Ann Campbell's case, what's going on there. We talked about the discussion group. We talked about the Atlantic article about serial killers. We talked about William Moult and his car being found at the bottom of a canal down there in Palm Beach, Florida. And then I previewed Typhenie Johnson's disappearance as Friday's episode. So that's all I got for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. Over an hour and a half, I think that's a record. I wouldn't count on 2 shows being always that long, but we shall see. And of course, you will hear me on Friday, and then we will conduct the think tank on Sunday evening on Facebook. I'm going to go. Thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. Cannot thank you enough. And didn't get a lot of questions from people, so maybe I'll get some more interesting questions uh, next week. You see, being that I only had that one from Larry this week about football, about toys and my lunchbox when I was a kid. So maybe we'll get some more next week. Good night, everyone. See ya.